To start with our sidebar, we are still going to stay inside of our navigation bar component, just below the app bar. So below the app bar, let's create an empty div component. And then inside of there, we are going to have a nav component. A nav is just HTML5 semantic tag. It's basically a div, but it says the navigation is going to be done inside of this div. Now we can also give it a class name. In this case, it's going to be classes.drawer. And if I haven't told you already, you can name these classes however you want. You don't have to name them drawer or link button or so on. Whatever name you give it, that's fine, but make sure that you use the same name here and also here. So now that we have that drawer, let's create a new component inside of there, but this component is going to be different depending on are we on mobile or on desktop device. So one more time, we can open a dynamic block and say if is mobile. In that case, we want to show this. Else, if we're not on mobile, then we want to show something else. And that something is going to be a Material UI drawer component. We can put it here as well as here. Great. Now, if you're not sure what drawer is, let's go to Material UI documentation and let's simply search for drawer. There we go. Temporary drawer. We're going to need a permanent one, so let's scroll down. Keep mounted. There we go. Responsive drawer. So we want to have our main content here with the navigation bar, but we want to have our sidebar or drawer, as they call it, right here on the side. So we can even take some code from their show source example right here, but I'm going to show you how to do it ourselves. So let's go ahead and get started. Our first drawer is going to have quite a few properties. It's going to have a property variant is equal to temporary. Then it's going to have the anchor property equal to right. And again, there are two ways to find out what each property is doing. If you hover over it, it should say variant. Right here, the variant to use. And then the anchor, side from which the drawer will appear. That's the first way. But this is useful only if you know the name of the property. But if you don't know what properties can you use and what they're doing, what is the answer? How can you find out more? Think about it. The answer is to go to that specific component and then to go to the API reference. Inside of here, you can see all the information about props that you can use for each single component. With that said, let's keep going. We're going to have the open property, which is going to be a variable that's going to say, is it currently open or not? For that, we need a special variable, more specifically a state. So I'm going to call it mobile open, and then I'm going to go to the top, and in here, let's create a new use state. So from React, we have to import use state, and then right here, somewhere along the top, we can say use state, and then usually I use this autofill here. So just keep going down and click use state. Now don't click anything, just start typing. We called it mobile open. Now use the tab key to go to the next entry. There we go. And then simply put it as false at the start. And then we can also add a semicolon. This is a really fast way to do the use state. Start typing, click here, name it something, and set it to something default. It's really quick once you learn this shortcut. With that said, now we have our set mobile open. Let's scroll down. We are using it right here. And below that mobile open, we're also going to have a class name, which is going to be equal to classes.drawer background. And also we're going to have a special classes object. Inside of there, we have a paper, and we're going to say classes.drawer paper. This is a special way of adding classes or styles to Material UI components when you want to override the underlying pieces of components that this component is made of. It's a bit confusing, but we're not going to use this quite often. And finally, we want to have the modal props with a capital M and P. That's going to be an object that's going to say keep mounted is equal to true. And that's going to be it for our drawer. But our drawer is not going to be a self-closing component, so we need to manually close our drawer. And then inside of there, we are going to have a sidebar component. That sidebar is a component that we are yet to create. And also, before we create it, let's pass the set mobile open state in there so that we can modify it from in there. There we go. Sidebar set mobile open. Of course, we are yet to create that component, so let's go to our components folder, create a new folder called sidebar, and then a new file called sidebar.jsx. As we usually do, we're first going to run rafce to get the basic structure. Then we are going to start by importing a few more things. From React, we're going to import a use effect hook. That is a hook that's going to allow us to make certain calls or changes once a side effect is done. Then we're also going to import quite a few things from Material UI, and these things are going to be, let's slowly start typing them in. That's going to be a divider component. We're going to have a list item, a list item text, as well as the list subheader. Finally, list item icon, as well as the box and the circular progress. All of these things are coming from add MUI and then / material. Quite a long line, but we have everything we need right in here. We're also going to need to import a link component. So import link, we already learned from where. That's going to be React router DOM. And finally, we're gonna import use theme, which is gonna be coming from add MUI / styles. Great, that seems to be it. Now let's create our sidebar. We already learned that it's gonna be accepting one prop because we're passing it to here, set mobile open. That's the prop that we need to destructure from the props. And while we're here, we can also immediately make use of this theme. So let's say const theme is equal to use theme. That way we'll have access to specific theme variables. Great. Now let's create the JSX of our sidebar. First, we're going to start with an empty React fragment, like this. Inside of there, we're going to have a link component. That link is not going to be a self-closing tag. There's going to be something inside of it. But before we see what's that, we're going to set the to property to go to just /. That's going to be our logo, our home button. And it's going to have a class name equal to classes.image link. If you think about it, we still haven't created the styles for the sidebar, so let's do that right away. Inside of the sidebar, I'm going to create a new file called, you should already know it, styles.js. Inside of there, we can basically copy what we have and simply delete the current styles. Finally, we can go to the sidebar and we can import it. Import, that's gonna be use styles from /styles. Great. Finally, we can say const classes is equal to use styles. Great. We're going to implement this class name right away, but let's just finish what's inside of this link. And that something is going to be an image. That image is going to have a class name equal to classes.image. It's also going to have a source, and that source is going to depend if we're using the dark theme or the light theme. So to check that, we can say theme.palette.mode. If we're on light mode, then we want to use a light or a red logo. If we are on dark mode, we can use the blue logo. So right now, I'm going to give you access to the links, so you can simply copy and paste the light and the dark logo, or rather, should I say the red or the blue logo. Again, this is going to be just below this video you're watching, so simply make sure to copy this string, and you should be good to go. So if we are on the light mode, we want to show the red logo. So let's go ahead and show red logo. Otherwise, it's going to be a blue logo. And with this, our application should already look so much better. But before that, let's also add the alt tag for screen readers. And let's say alt, this is going to be Filmpire logo. Great. Finally, to see this on our devices, we have to add these class names. So let's go to styles and let's implement these styles right away. Let's see, we have the image link as well as the image. So our image link object is going to have a display equal to flex. It's going to have a justify content equal to center it. And we also need some padding. So padding is going to be 10% on top and bottom and 0% on left and right. And finally, for the image, we're just going to set the width to be equal to 70%. Of course, this needs to be in a string. Even I forget sometimes. Great. And of course, we're going to have more things inside of this sidebar, but I first want to see just how it looks. Before we go ahead and see that, I just remembered that we haven't imported it here. So let's go to the top of this component and let's simply import. That's going to be sidebar from ... We just need to say ... because we are immediately in the components, and then we have to go to our index of the components, and then we have to export the sidebar we just created. For every new component we create, we'll have to add it to this index file, because then we'll be able to use it or import it just like this. Great. We can also add a sidebar inside of our second drawer, which we didn't finish already, but let's just put it here as well. And we also need to pass set mobile open. Great. Now, if I remember correctly, we still haven't implemented the classes.drawer background, drawer, and drawer paper. So let's go to the navbar styles and implement them straight away. Let's create our drawer first. And our drawer is going to have just styles for devices that are not mobile devices. So we can copy this, paste it here, and it's just going to be above small width devices. So everything that's not mobile. We can set the width to be equal to, and then we're going to set that to be drawer width. So why are we setting this as a variable? Well, for one reason, because we need to make it static. It's always going to be one specific width. In this case, we're going to set const drawer width to be equal to 240 pixels. There we go. And then finally, we're also going to give it flex shrink to be equal to 0. Great. So I've said the first reason why we're doing this is because we need to have a constant width of the sidebar. But the second reason is because we can. And that's a beautiful thing with CSS in JS. I know it's not so good to type in because you have all these strings and you don't have any CSS highlighting or stuff like that. But you can actually use real JavaScript logic and variables inside of CSS, which is amazing. We just made use of this variable. You can also use something like Boolean. If something is true or false, then do small or do big. You can use things like this. You can use real JavaScript inside of CSS, and that's just something that I wanted to show you right now. But with that, we created the code for our drawer, we have our menu button, and we just have to add the drawer paper as well as the link button. So below this drawer, let's create our drawer paper, and we're simply going to say width is equal to drawer width. Let's see what else are we missing in the navbar. We added the drawer paper, and it looks like we're missing the drawer background, but I just noticed that I'm not even using that. So that's going to be deleted. Everything we need is inside of this drawer and drawer paper. And finally, if you remember correctly, we still haven't made use of this link button. So let's implement the styles for the link button as well. We're going to put it at the bottom here, link button. And we only want to add styles to this link button on hover. So how are we going to implement that hover effect? We cannot simply say something like hover and then start applying classes here. In CSS and JS, in this material UI way, you have to add a string and then say and colon hover. And then if you do colon an object, now whatever you do is going to be applied only if you hover over it. We can set the color to be equal to white, and we'll have to add an important tag right there. Let me spell that correctly, important. And we're also going to set the text decoration to be equal to none. That's going to be all the styles for our navigation bar. I think we should be able to see something on our application right now. We've added quite a lot of code, a new component for the sidebar, so let's go ahead and check it out. And now that we're checking it out, we've written a lot of code, but there doesn't seem to be something here. The only thing that we can see is that the navigation bar has been moved to the right, and also the movies. It has been moved 240 pixels to the right to reserve the space for our sidebar. So let's add just a bit more code and then we'll be able to see it in action. The code we have to add is the remaining part of our second drawer, our drawer for desktop devices. So let's go ahead and implement that straight away. This one is going to be a lot simpler. We're going to say classes is equal to, and then an object. Paper is classes dot drawer paper, same thing as we had above. The variant in this case is going to be permanent because we always want to have the sidebar visible on desktop devices. And then finally, the property open is simply going to be set to true always. So just simply type open as a prop right here. Now let's save it and let's take a look. There we go. Our glorious sidebar is now here. 240 pixels. It's taking the left part of the screen. It has the blue Filmpire logo, and we are ready to start adding some movie sections just below. So let's go ahead and continue the work on our sidebar. Let's go to our sidebar component, and just below the link, we're going to implement a few more things. First thing that we need is going to be a divider component. It's a simple self-closing tag. Then below that, we're gonna need a list. Just like this, a list that's going to have a list subheader inside of it. So list subheader. Inside of there, we can say categories. In here, we're gonna have all of the different movie categories. And then below, we want to map over those categories. Right now, we don't yet have them, but let's create them. Simply create a mock of all of our categories. Const mock categories. Or we can say demo categories. It's like some demo data about categories. That's going to be an array. And then inside of there, let's do something like comedy. Let's also do action. Let's do horror. And let's do something like animation. Great. We're also going to need some more demo category data. And this is going to be for larger categories like popular, top rated, and upcoming. So let's say const categories, and that's going to be equal to an array. But this time, an array is going to be made of a few objects. Each one of our objects is going to have a label property. In this case, let's do something like popular, and it's going to have a value. And the value in this case is going to be a popular, just with lowercase letters. We're going to duplicate this 2 more times. The second one is going to say top rated, and then the value has to be top underscore rated. The third one is going to be upcoming, and a value is going to be upcoming. Now we have categories and demo categories. Let's create our lists. Below our list subheader, we're going to loop over our demo categories. So let's say demo categories.map. Inside of there, we have a callback function. But keep in mind, we don't have a curly brace here that denotes a function block. We just have a parenthesis because we want to instantly return something. Inside of our map, we're going to get access to a specific category, but each category is going to have a label and a value. So it looks like I've made a mistake there. Even our demo categories have to have a label and a value. So I'm simply going to copy these categories. I'm going to change the name to demo categories, and then we can change these to be comedy. This is going to be action, horror, and then the last one can be animation. But we also have to change the value to be comedy, action, horror, and then animation. It's important that we have these values lowercase because later on we're going to use these values to fetch real data from the API. There we go. Now we're looping over these categories, and then for each category, we're destructuring the label and the value. So what do we want to display for each category? Well, we want to display a link, and that link is going to have a key because we're looping over that array, and the key is going to be value. It's also going to have a class name, which is going to be equal classes.links, and it's going to have a to property pointing just to /. Now inside of that link, we're going to have a material UI list item. And we want to have an onClick property because we want something to happen on click. For now, we're simply going to leave that as a callback function. Also, that list item is going to be a button, so we can simply say button there. And inside of that list item, we're going to have a list item icon. And inside of there, we can simply show an image. For now, as the source, I'm simply going to use the red logo we had before. So I'm going to say source or src is equal to red logo. Later on, we're going to get the real genre icons for every single genre that exists. We also have to give it a class name equal to classes.genre images. And we're going to set the height to be equal to 30. Great. Now we have the image as well. And finally, below the list item icon, we need to have the list item text. And that's going to be a self-closing tag that's going to have the primary equal to a label. Great. Now let's save that. See how ESLint fixed this indentation for us to make it look better. And we finally have to implement the class names we've added. Class names like genre images, links, and so on. So let's go to our styles. And just below the image, let's start implementing those styles. There are only two different classes. Links, which is going to be equal to color. And now let's make use of that built-in theme object. We can say color is equal to theme.palette.text.primary. And also, we're going to set the text decoration to be equal to none. Finally, for the genre image, we want to change the color of the logo depending on if we are in the dark mode or light mode. So let's say genre image. And then to change the image mode, we can say filter. And then if theme.palette.mode is triple equal to dark, in that case, we can simply say dark. Else, we can say invert and then 1. If we are on dark mode, this is going to actually invert the images to make it more visible on the dark mode. Great. Now that we have that, let's go ahead and save it and check it out in the browser. There we go. This already looks so much better. But for now, since we don't have any real category icons, let's simply remove this film bar. We don't really need that. So I'm going to go back and simply comment this out. There we go. This is so much better now. We have categories, comedy, action, horror, and animation. So see how we are not actually creating 4 different list items and list texts. We've simply created an array here that then we're looping over. And now I'm going to repeat this thing one more time. I'm going to add a divider below this list. And then I'm simply going to copy this entire list right here and paste it here. Now that I think about it, the first category should have been just categories, like this. Categories. And if we save that, you can see that now we have categories, popular, top rated, upcoming. And then below, I just copied the same thing, but we're looping over the actual category names like comedy, action, horror, and animation. And finally, we can rename the list subheader. The top one are indeed categories, but the bottom one are actual genres. Great. And that's going to be everything that we need right now because we're not yet fetching real genre data. We just have the static data right here. So this is what we can see, and that's fine for now. Right now, we're just building out the layout to make our life easier later on. And if we take one deep breath and step away for a second, this is already starting to look good. We have our navigation bar at the top, we have our sidebar on the left side with different categories and genres we're looping over. We also have the main content right there. It simply says movies now, but if we switch to something like actors, and then 1 to 3, we are going to see actors. So we just have to implement those components, and our pagination and our routing works as well. Now, one main question is it mobile responsive? So let's go ahead and right click and then click inspect and then toggle the device toolbar. Right now, it kinda is responsive because we made this navigation bar look like this on mobile devices. But if we go ahead and click this, we won't see the navigation bar and we are kinda stuck here. So let's go ahead and implement that right now. For that, we have to go to the navbar and we have to make use of this mobile open variable. More specifically, in this drawer, we're gonna have the onClose property, and we're going to use a callback function and say set mobile open is not equal to mobile open. There we go. So we're simply toggling it off. But this is not the best way to change the state in React. And actually, it's against React's main guidelines to change the state using the previous version of that same state. So what we should do instead is create a callback function inside of this state field. And right here, we can say something like previous mobile open. And then we're going to set it to not previous mobile open. This is the correct way to do it. But in here, we're just closing it. But where are we actually opening it? We need to toggle it on right at the start of this component on our icon menu button inside of this on click. So right here, what we can say is basically the same thing below. But in here, we're closing it. Above, we want to open it. So we can basically copy this entire callback function and paste it instead of this one right here. So just to repeat, once we click on this menu icon, then we're calling this function right here. And that function is simply saying set mobile open to be a different state than it was right now. Let's go ahead and save it and take a look in the browser. There we go. It's currently false by default, so it's closed. And if I click here, it comes up. Take a look at that glorious sidebar. We have a big Filmpire logo at the top right. We have all of our categories and our genres listed right here. Also, you can click them to switch between the genres, and you can click to the side to completely close the sidebar. There we go. Everything works. And one more time on desktop devices, it is as glorious as ever. Our navigation bar is done and our sidebar is done as well. Let's go ahead and start with the next step.